Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Esther Luttrell, and she has an amazing life and an amazing story. So, hi, Esther.
Hi.
And we've been sitting here talking for 20 minutes.
Oh,
um, so, I'm going to let you start wherever you like and take as long as you like, okay?
okay. Well, first of all, what fun and what a great opportunity to be on your show. You go through a lot of things in life, and sometimes you wonder why. And you say, I know this wasn't just for me. Surely there's something somebody can learn from this. And then you don't think you're helping anybody else, and you've lived a selfish life. And somebody like you just comes along and gives you an opportunity to share those experiences. And in sharing, you're hoping that you're doing somebody some good somewhere, that everything you've experienced now has a reason, if you can help others with what you've gone through. So you were asking me about the book I wrote, Dear Dean Love Mom, one of the books. And I really said I don't really want to talk about the book. I want to talk about the reason I wrote the book. Is that okay with you?
Yes,
Yeah, that
let's do.
because I really believe that everybody has had a paranormal experience in their life, don't you?
Yeah.
I do believe it. I think a lot of people either deny it or or just keep it to themselves, because I think the reason is they're afraid they won't be believed. Don't you?
Yes.
Paranormal experiences are most unusual experiences by their nature. So that's why it took me 13 years after my son died to gather the courage to tell some of the stories that I tell in there. So if you don't mind, I'd just tell you that Dean worked for an airline company, but that's Dean. Dean worked for an airline company, but he was an aspiring screenwriter. And he died of complications from pneumonia in 1994. And for anybody who's ever lost a loved one, it isn't just emotional pain, it's physical, you know. And I really thought my world had ended. He was 27. And I just thought that was the end of the world. About a week after he died, I went to my daughter's house in New Jersey. And one of the first nights there, I was sitting in the guest room and the lights were all off. But there was an ambient light coming in from the outside. I remember sitting on the side of the bed and thinking what a nice job she had done with the room and how pretty it was. But no matter what I thought, ever since Dean died, which had been a week or so before, there was always this tape that played in the background of where's Dean? We think we know, we think we understand what happens when people die. But when it's that close to you, you sort of question everything. At least I did. And I thought, if I only knew where he was, if I knew he was okay. Well, as I'm thinking that, I shut my eyes and I'm just sitting there on the side of the bed thinking, if only I knew where he was. And I had the sensation of wind hitting my face so hard that if I'd had long hair, it would have been flying back. I was good. And I caught my breath. I was kept going like that because the wind was just gushing at me. And then I had the sensation of flying. It sounds so stupid, but it's true. I just felt like I was flying. I wasn't aware of my body, but I was aware of going over the neighborhood very quickly, over trees, and then I saw mountains under me. I was also aware that Dean was behind me, just over my shoulder, and that we were just going so swiftly. And pretty soon we were in this vastness of space. And it was beautiful with stars everywhere, but with nothing to gauge against. I didn't know if we were still going fast. I didn't feel wind in my face. And all of a sudden, we were standing on what looked like a moonscape. Just boulders and rocks, like pictures we've seen of moonscapes. Beside me was a boulder that was very, very high. And I keep always thinking of the word 13 feet, and I don't know where that comes from, but I was aware of this huge boulder. Everything was bathed in a soft blue light. It was beautiful, but it was absolutely quiet, and it was lonely. And on the horizon, I saw what looked like a moon coming up over the horizon, like a moon rising. And I thought, I hope he doesn't live here. It would be so lonely. And then finally I did say, where are we, Dean? And he's still a bit behind me, very close, but right behind me. And he said, this is where I come when I want to think, or I want to work on my spirituality, when I just want to be a lone mom. This is where I come. And I said, and what is that? Pointing toward what looked like the moon rising. And he chuckled and he said, that's Earth, Mom. And then I was back on the side of the bed and I was crying. And I just kept saying, that really happened. I'm not asleep. I'm wide awake. And he showed me where he goes to think. And I'm just going, thank you, sweetheart. Thank you. You are all right. And I sort of just lay over on my side and lay down. And I felt the warmest, most definite kiss right here on my cheek. And I said, it was like a goodbye kiss, you know? And I said, thank you, darling. Thank you so much. Now, if you want to pursue that and say, did that really happen? What's the answer to that?
I guess, Ellie, you can answer that.
No, I can't, because my answer would be, of course it happened.
Right.
But it is one of those things that I think keep people from telling, because I certainly didn't tell a lot of people. Not many people would have been interested, and even fewer would have believed me. But it goes to show again that our loved ones never, really never leave us. When I got back home, it wasn't a couple of weeks after that, or longer, a couple of months maybe, but I got word that I was going to get Dean's insurance money. And as I sat in my office, I had a rocking chair in my office, and I'm sitting there and I've got the letter in my hand, and I'm going, I don't want his insurance money. I want him. Then I thought, what can I do with his insurance money to honor him? How can I use it where it's just about honoring him? How do I do that? Well, across the room was my desk, and under the desk was a box. In that box, there was a stack of scripts. And I remember that he would come through the door with a whole bunch of papers in his hands, and he would say, Mom, I've got a great idea for a movie, because I had been a screenwriter for quite a while then, and I was working at MGM. And yeah, I've got a great idea for a movie. And I said, wonderful, sweetie. Just throw it in the box, and when I have time, let's go through that. Well, when your boy's 27 years old, you think you have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in this rocking chair with this notice of insurance, and I see that box, and I hear Dean so clearly in my head. And he said, that's it, Mom. Go out and help others. Help other budding screenwriters. Go do it. Tell them how it really is in Hollywood. And so I got up and I just went to the phone. I didn't even question that. I went to the phone and I called a man who had been my boss when I was production coordinator on the TV show Chips. My boss was Don Gold. And at that time, Don was producing and writing for a Diagnosis Murder, if you remember that Dick Van Dyke show. Anyway, I called him and I said, Don, I know what I'm going to do with Dean's insurance money. I'm going to go across the country and find young screenwriters and help them. I'm going to give 2-day workshops. Do you want to go? And he said, sure. When do we leave? It was that simple. So we made up, I thought, well, I've never taken a writing class. I'd earned my living as a writer my whole life, but I'd never taken a writing class. And I didn't know how to do that. And I thought, God gives you the idea, he'll give you the way. So I thought, okay, let's just give a workshop like you wish you had years ago when you started. You had to go through all of the nonsense to learn what you know. Just tell everybody the kind of thing you wish you had been told. And so we were set to go to Austin, Texas was going to be our first workshop. Well, Florida's my home state. And for some reason, they did a story about me in a Florida magazine. And about a couple of weeks before we were to go to Austin for our first workshop, the story came out about me working in the studios, and now I was going to be giving workshops or something. I can't remember.
What magazine was it?
What?
What magazine was that in?
It was a Florida magazine. I think it was called Florida Living.
Florida. Okay. I couldn't understand what you said. Okay.
It was a Florida magazine anyway. Well, so the story came out and I wasn't even aware of it at that moment, but that ties in with what I'm about to tell you. I was in my office and the phone rang, and I have to tell you that my desk butted up to a picture window. On the other side of the window was a flower bed of hydrangeas about 4 feet wide. And that's where the driveway stopped. So the phone rings in my office and I go over to it and I'm still standing. I'm standing in front of the picture window and I answer it. And it's a woman who says, is this Esther Luttrell? And I said, yes. And she gave me her name and she said, and I'm not crazy. Okay. And she said, but I'm in Fort Lauderdale. I shouldn't say where she was. She was in Florida. She was in Florida and she had just read the article about me. And she said, when I saw your name, I began to cry and shake. And I don't know why. And it was so bad and was so strong that I had to look you up and call you. Now, I'm in California. She's in Florida. I never heard of this lady. She never heard of me before. And she starts telling me, I don't know why I had this reaction when I saw you, when I saw your name. And I thought there was some reason I was supposed to call you. And then she said, but I'm not thinking clearly these days. My son committed suicide the other day. And I think I'm going nuts. I said I wasn't nuts, but I sometimes wonder, I just don't see anything clearly. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry about your son. I just lost mine too in April. And she went on to tell me that Andy was, I can't remember if he was 19 or 20. He was very young. Anyway, and she was saying that he had killed himself because he thought he had disappointed her. And she said he could never disappoint me. Why would he think that? So as she's telling me this, I'm still standing there in front of the window, and I just happened to glance at the window. Pegi, on the other side of that glass, right at the hydrangeas, was not only my son, three-dimensional as he can be, nothing ghostly or weird about it, just wearing his jeans and a t-shirt and being Dean. And his eyes were so sparkly and bright. And the smile on his face was like, "Hi, surprise, Mom." It was just like that. He was so pleased. Well, standing beside him was a young man I never had seen before. And he was Dean's height, which would put him at 5'9". And he was slender like Dean. And that kid was standing there with his left elbow up on Dean's shoulder. And they were like two buddies who have a surprise for me. "Hey, see us? Hi there." And they were both just grinning. And so I thought, could that be her son? And I said to her, she's talking away, and I said, "My son is in my driveway." Well, I just told her he died. And she said, "What?" And I said, "My son, he's in my driveway. And there's somebody with him, a young man that I've never seen before." And I don't remember what she said, but she was coming unglued. And I said, "May I describe him to you?" Because I was convinced that must be her son. And I said, he's the same height as my son, 5'9", probably about the same weight. And he's very toned. He's more toned than Dean, as if he plays sports, not football, but maybe basketball. And I said, he has on jeans, and he has on a t-shirt that has a white collar, and it's aqua and white striped, and it has a little emblem where there should be a pocket. At that time, t-shirts that had an alligator on them were very popular. I told her, "But it's not an alligator. I don't know what it is. I can't make it out." And she said, "What color is his hair?" And I said, "Well, it's either a dark blonde or a light brown, but it's natural curly, it looks like. And it's very neat, and it comes to the top of his collar. And his eyes, they're so big, they look hazel from here. And he has deep dimples." And she just burst out crying. She said, "That's my son."
Oh,
And when she said that, the boys were gone. That was it. So she and I had a little bit of a conversation after that, and I don't remember what else, because when you see something like that, your mind is just saying, that can't be, that can't be, that can't be. That really was Dean. And that really was her boy. I think his name was Andy, I'm not sure. But I talk about it in the book. Anyway, so the question then, when I would go out and talk about that, I saw Dean, I got the message that he sent me with that smile. It said, "Life and love are eternal, Mom. Go out and tell them." I got that as clear as a bell. And the question is, why did her son appear to me? Do you want to take a guess? What is your version of that?
say that last sentence again.
Why do you think Andy appeared to me with his mother on the line?
Confirmation for both of you.
Yes, yes. Because if Dean had appeared to me and just me, even today, I have a hard time understanding it and accepting that really happened. So can you imagine if it had just been me, I would have by now denied it. I think I would have said I wanted him to be there, or I had this illusion or something. But because she called me out of the blue, and then her son appears, she has confirmation, and I have confirmation of Dean's message that life and love are eternal. Nothing's going to break that bond.
Yeah. Yeah. Confirmations keep us sharing our story.
Yes, and also, to just assure everybody who's lost a loved one that they are still with you. Oh, I was going to say, Don and I went on and we gave several years of workshops. But Pegi, people came to me, it never happened before in my life, but they began coming to me at airports, after screenwriting workshops, they just on the phone, a lot of those same kinds of phone calls that would begin with, "Are you Esther Luttrell?" Yes. Giving me their name and then adding, "I'm not crazy." I can't tell you how many times I had conversations that started like that. And I want to give you an example of one, if you don't mind, of uh, just the kind of thing, because I couldn't understand why Dean was sending me all these people. And then I would talk to God and say, "Do you want me to write screenplays about them? I don't understand who I would sell them to." But let me tell you, I was in the supermarket. Larry, my husband, had just picked me up at the airport. I'd come back from a weekend of workshops. He picked me up at the airport, and I wanted to stop at an all-night supermarket and pick up something, for the next day. So I'm standing at a tomato bin, and Larry's on one side, and I'm on this side, and there is a lady, quite a bit shorter than I am, quite a bit older than me, and she's standing over here, and I'm looking at these tomatoes, and she keeps staring at me. And I glanced at her, and I'd go back to looking at the tomatoes, but she was making me uncomfortable. So finally, just to say something, I said, "Pricey, aren't they?" And she said, well, she didn't say anything. She nodded and kept staring. And then I said, "For this price, they should be lined in gold." And then she said, "May I tell you a story?" And my husband rolled his eyes and walked away, because this happened all the time.
He knew it was coming.
And I turned to her and I said, "Well, of course." And so this is the story she told me. She said, I was married a very long time and to my husband. And one day, not so long ago, I came into the living room one morning and he was sitting in his chair. And I thought, well, now what's he doing sitting in his chair at this hour? That's not like him. I hope he feels okay, but that's just not like him. And she said, they were in Florida. And she said it was so hot that I thought, well, I'm going to go fix him some iced tea. That'll make him feel better. So she goes in the kitchen and she said she makes some iced tea. She comes back and she puts the iced tea beside him, but he appears to be asleep. He's fallen asleep. And she wasn't going to disturb him, so she just left the iced tea there and she kind of patted him on the shoulder, I think she said. She went on about her chores, and after a while she looked in again, and he was still sleeping and the iced tea hadn't been touched. So she came in and she shook his shoulder and he didn't respond. And she said, "He's dead." And she grabbed the phone and she called 911. Well, as soon as she calls, she realizes that the paramedics have no way to get up to her house. The house is on a little knoll. There's a long, long driveway, she said, that goes down to a fence where there's a gate, and she keeps the gate locked, her husband did. So she ran out of the house and she ran down that drive and she got to the gate and she unlocked it and she threw the gate back. And as she did, the ambulance was actually coming down the road. And so she went on up to the house and waited at the door for them. No, I'm sorry. They're coming down the road. She ran up to the house, opened the door. And when she did, her husband was still sitting in the chair, of course, but he was smiling at her. And he had the biggest smile she said she had ever seen on him. She said, all I could think was, he looks like he did when he was 25 years old. And she told me there had been an accident with some equipment a couple of years before. And a piece of equipment had hit him in the mouth. And it had knocked his teeth out, but it had blackened his teeth. It damaged the nerves in his gums and made his teeth turn black. Well, here he was, smiling at her with these beautiful teeth. And she said, how could it be? And she runs in and she kneels in front of him. And she takes his hands and she's kissing his knuckles. And she says, oh, darling, I thought I lost you. "Oh, honey, I thought you were gone." And she said she looked up at him and he was just smiling so tenderly at her. Well, the paramedics by then had arrived. And so she jumped up and she goes to the door, and of course they're jumping out of their vehicle and hurrying toward her. And she said, "No, it's all right. There's no crisis now. The emergency over. He's fine." But I do think that we should go ahead and take him into the hospital and have a test run, because that was very scary and I don't know what happened. And she said by then they had reached her and she opened the door for them. And she said, "But you can see that he's fine now." And she looked, and of course he was gone. He was dead. So now we're at the tomato bin and she's telling me this story and she's got tears in her eyes. And she looks up at me and she said, "Have you ever heard of anything like that?" And I said, "No, honey, I haven't." She said, "But what do you make of it?" And I said, "I'll tell you what I make of it. I make of it that that's exactly how your husband is right now, the way you saw him. And that's what he wanted you to know, that he's all right, and that he's right with you, and he's all right. That's what I make of it." And then she just fell in my arms and I hugged her and we cried and my husband walked back. And anyway, those are the kinds of stories that I heard just as much out of the blue as at the tomato bin. And
There must be angels or our loved ones pushing us to approach these people, or these people approach us.
well, that's what I couldn't understand. And I would say after every encounter like that, and that's what my book is full of, but just about the encounters. I would say, "Dean, what do you want me to do with this story, darling?" And then at night I'd say, talking to God, "I don't know what to do. These are beautiful stories. They're beautiful people. I know I'm supposed to do something, but what?" Well, I had 13 years of that. 13 years. And then I would think, I can't write a book about this. First of all, people would call me a liar. And I wouldn't put Dean's name with anything that was an exaggeration or a lie. I didn't want
Right,
his name associated with that.
right.
So anyway, after 13 years, abruptly as when it started, it stopped. And I mean, nobody was talking to me at airports. Nobody told me their stories. And I felt a disconnect with Dean. I didn't feel his presence. I didn't feel God's presence anymore, because I'd always felt God's presence when these things happened. Everybody had left and okay, they've given up on me. They gave me 13 years of stories and I haven't done anything with any of them, but I don't know what to do with them. I don't know who would believe me. I can't even repeat them. So one Sunday, my friend Gail and I had been to church and we were coming home and I was driving, and Gail said, "What are you going to do this afternoon?" And I said, "Well, I think I'll go to Barnes and Noble's." And she said, "Barnes and Noble's?" Now, what's so amazing about that is that I live in Topeka, and it isn't like we have a whole world of things, that are exciting to do here. So every Wednesday, Gail and I went to Barnes and Noble's, and we'd get a latte at, well, where we went was to the Starbucks in the Barnes and Noble's, and then
Yeah.
we'd get our latte and our magazines. And that was our big Wednesday night. So now she's asked me what I'm going to do. And I say, I'm going to Barnes and Noble's. And she said, "But that's what we do on Wednesday nights." And I said, "Well, I can go today if I want to and still go on Wednesday. Do you want to go with me?" And she said, "Well, sure." So that evening, I pick Gail up at her house and we go to Barnes and Noble's. And we go and we get our latte and we get our magazines, and we're sitting at this table in Starbucks. And Gail keeps looking at me like, "Why are we here?" And I go, "I don't know. I just felt I was supposed to be here." Well, then it gets to be closing time and nothing has happened. And I say to Gail, do you mind putting the magazines back? I just want to run to the restroom. She said, sure. So I think all Barnes and Nobles are pretty much laid out the same. In the middle of Barnes and Nobles is an information desk. So the restrooms are in the back. So I was coming back from the restroom. As I passed the information desk, I had noticed there was a tall man in a hunter's cap and a hunter's jacket standing there. And we were just about shoulder to shoulder as I was walking past, and he said the words, "Hello from Heaven." Well, have you heard of that book?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Hello from Heaven was written by Bill Guggenheim and his wife then, Judy. And I had a radio show when I lived in Florida. And he had been a guest on my show. He was taking his book around. It had just come out. So I was familiar with Hello from Heaven. And I was familiar with Bill Guggenheim. And anyway, I just stopped because how amazing just to hear those words, "Hello from Heaven." Didn't hear any other words. And I turned around and looked at him. And he looked at me like, "You got a problem, lady?" And I said, "Excuse me, I didn't mean to stare at you, but you just said Hello from Heaven." And that's a book I'm familiar with. And I don't know, it just caught my attention. And he said, "You know that book?" And I said, "Well, yes." And the young man who wrote it. And he said, "Tell me about it." And I said, "Well, Bill and his wife, Judy, spent 7 years going around, I think, the world, talking to people who had had communications with loved ones from the other side without the help of a clairvoyant or a Ouija board, a crystal ball, or anything, just unexpected, spontaneous communication." And he said, "Do you believe that's possible?" And I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Let me finish up here. I want to order the book. Can I talk to you? I've got to talk to you." And I said, "I'll be at the front door." So I go to Gail is waiting. And I said, "Gail, I think I know why I'm at Barnes and Nobles." And she said, "Oh, okay." So in a few moments, here he comes, this great big man, like 6'2". And he comes barreling up to me and he said, "Please tell me about Hello from Heaven." And so I just told him, kind of what I had just said. And he said, "So you do believe that's possible?" And I said, it is possible. Yes, it's a reality." And he said, "I don't know. I don't know." He said, "I own a bed and breakfast inn outside of Lawrence." Well, Lawrence is a town that's 20 miles away from Topeka. And he said, "I own a bed and breakfast inn. And my son, Justin, was my partner, my friend, my buddy. And Justin died in an accident. And I am so mad at God. I am so angry. I can't do anything. I'm just so angry." And I heard in my head a male voice say, "I can't get through the anger." I heard that. I'd never heard somebody else's voice before, but Dean's. And I said to him, "Oh, hon, your son wants me." I felt so audacious to say that. "Your son wants me to tell you that he wants to communicate with you, but he can't get through your anger. It's a barrier." And this big man started crying. And he said, "Today was the worst day of my life. I was working at the B&B, and I thought, I can't go on. I can't go any further. I can't make it without Justin." And I was ranting at God. And a friend drove up about that time and got out of his car and came over and saw that I was distraught. And he said to me, "Have you ever read the book Hello from Heaven?" And I told him I'd never heard of it. And he said, "I want you to go to Barnes and Nobles and get a copy now. Before you do anything else, I want you to go get a copy." He said, "Well, I had to finish my chores," and I did. Then I got in my truck and I was going to Barnes and Nobles in Lawrence. And I'm driving, he says, and I'm crying and I'm still mad. And I just keep going. And as I get almost to Barnes and Nobles in Lawrence, I knew I was supposed to keep driving. And I thought, why am I keep driving? And everything in me said, go to Barnes and Nobles in Topeka. He said, I've never had anything like that happen before in my life, but I'll tell you how much I believed it. I went right past Barnes and Nobles in Lawrence, and I drove on here to Topeka.
I got chills.
And he said, and I come through that door and I come to the information desk and I want to know where Hello from Heaven is. And you start talking to me. And he said, in this smallest voice for this great big man, I'll never forget how small his voice was and how filled with tears. He said, what do I do?
Mhm.
And I said, darling, you get over the anger so that your son can communicate with you, because he's with you. He'll always be with you. And he just grabbed me and hugged me and cried. And he said, thank you for being my teacher. And I said, honey, I'm not a teacher. I was just the messenger. And so we left, and Gail says, well, I'll be darned.
Mhm.
We get home, and I go in the house, and I go upstairs to my bedroom. And when I start to go to bed, I get on my knees by my bed, and I said, thank you, God. Thank you, Dean. And thank you, God. I think Dean probably said that Sunday, oh, I don't know, God. Let's give her one more chance. And I think they gave me one more chance to get it right. And kneeling beside my bed, I told him, I got it. I'm to write a book. The book will be called Dear Dean Loved Mom. And it'll have all of those stories in it about all of those people. And then I will go out and I will give screenwriting workshops. I'll give talks on Between Heaven and Earth. And I will tell them what Dean said, tell them. Dean said, life and love are eternal. Go out and tell them, Mom. And so I got started on my book. I wrote it in 3 weeks. And there were times when I was typing that I would say, I'm going, I'm not a very good typist. I'm the world's worst typist. I'm going, then I think, slow down. So I can't take dictation that fast. Slow down. Like I was being fed the words. And I swear to you, I swear this is true. It's why I don't want to tell these stories for 13 years. Nobody's going to believe me, but I promise it's true. There wasn't one strikeout word or one do-over. And I'm not that good a writer. I am not. I've been on this one book I'm writing now for 8 months and I can't get it right. That was literally dictated. Amazingly enough, it wasn't a bestseller. And so I didn't do it for a bestseller, but I was surprised because you would think if God's going to go to that much trouble for 13 years that a broad spectrum of people would be waiting for it. But you can't look at the consequences of what you do when you think you're doing a God thing. Those are all in his hands. You just do your part.
I think sometimes it's for that one person or 100 people, 1,000 people. It may not be millions, but it's the ones that God wants to reach.
Pegi. Oh my God. I wasn't going to take the time. Oh my goodness, we've been talking for an hour. But I wasn't planning to tell you this at all, but let me just give you one example. I'll give you 2 quick examples. I hope we're not boring everybody to tears.
No, you got plenty of time.
I was giving my talk on love and life are eternal at the Unity Church in Key West in Florida. And I was very nervous. I think it was one of the first times I'd gone out and talked about it. Very, very nervous. And the place was so crowded that they had to open an ante room. Now they were wasn't crowded because Esther was there. They don't know me from Adam's house cat. They were there because of the subject. They wanted to hear somebody talk on the subject. And so I finished my talk. I got through it somehow. I did notice in the front row was a young couple. I say young, maybe in their early 40s. I noticed them because they were so attentive. And when I got through talking and people came up to say thank you, and you know how polite people are after you give a talk, they waited until everybody was through, and then they came up to me, and it was the husband who had tears. The mother was very solemn, but the father had tears. And they told me that the week before, I believe it was, their daughter had come home from college for the weekend. And on her way back to college, she was killed in an automobile accident. And she was their only child. They did not see how they could go on. Their grief had been so deep. And this Sunday was the first time, they didn't even know what the subject was going to be in church. But this was the first time they had been out since then. And he said, and listening to you and listening to Dean's message, we know now that our girl is okay and that she's still with us. And I just got goosebumps myself because I'm remembering.
I got chills right now. You tell me that.
Yeah. And then one other quick one, because I'd like to hear your reply on this. I was speaking at a church in Tampa, Florida, and it was one of those night assembly things, and quite a crowd in there. I finished, and it was Q&A time, and a man from the middle of the auditorium, the sanctuary back there, he calls out, "I don't believe in God." And the place got so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I think everybody was worried about me. How was she going to answer that? I was kind of worried about me too. I didn't know how to answer that. I have a friend who has since come up with the perfect answer. I wish I had been bright enough to think of it myself. But listen to what he said when I told that story to a room full of people. And my friend said, I said, how would you have responded? My friend Dwayne said, I would have said, describe this God to me that you don't believe in. I probably wouldn't believe in him either.
Good answer.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
Because it isn't God we don't believe in. It's our perception of God. And we've got him mixed up. And that was my answer to him, is he said, I said, may I ask you why you don't believe in God, is what I said. Isn't that clever? Duh. And he said, because I have prayed for things that should have happened and they didn't. And then my reply, which I don't think was earth-shattering, was, I sometimes wonder if we don't get God confused with Santa Claus.
It's a good answer.
He's a man who's making a list of who's been good and bad, and he's checking it, and he's only going to answer those that have been good. You know, there's only one true prayer, and that's a prayer of thanksgiving, because God already knows everything we need. He already knows that, and he wants you to confirm that you know it too. And I didn't say it then, but in other talks I've given, I have gone on to kind of elaborate on that, because how many of us have an illness? You know, I'll get something wrong with me, and I tell my friends, like, I think they can do something about it. Since they can't do anything about it, I'm obviously just looking for sympathy, right? That's the only reason I have for telling anybody is I feel sorry for me. But like now I say, no, I want your prayer, but I really wonder about the sincerity of that. I really wonder if I just want people to know that I'm in pain. Then we turn right around and we pray. And even when we do the thing of thank you, Lord, for perfect health, you know nothing about this nonsense that I'm feeling now, because you only know perfection. And I praise and thank you that this is only an illusion, that this is only something that I've conjured up. I don't need this. And I thank you that I am in perfect health. Well, what happens the next time a friend calls? Well, you have no idea what hurts. This just, I just canceled out everything I told God. And I feel like God sits back and says, you want to do it that way? It's a lot easier if you just lean on me and let me handle it. But you want to do it that way, you just go right ahead. It's going to hurt. You end up going to a doctor and taking a pill, or you could leave it to me. But so much of what we say we don't believe in God, we have a misconception. And I probably do too. I have a friend who's a minister, and he has these great cases. He doesn't believe in all of these paranormal things I talk about. I mean, he doesn't think I'm lying, but he thinks I'm delusional. He thinks that the devil has a hand in it because the devil can present things that look very godly. So he's very concerned about, my miserable soul. And they pray for me a lot, which I appreciate. And I told him one day, I said, what's funny? You and I can talk about what we think is the truth. But let's say you and I are in an automobile accident one day at the same time. We're in the car together. Boom, we're both in heaven. You know what we're going to say? I never dreamed. It's going to be something we never even comprehended. So why do we even try to convince each other of what's waiting for us? We know that God's waiting for us. That's all we need to know. The how and the why, I think, will be as varied as there are people on the planet.
And people don't believe in God. He still exists whether people believe in him or not.
I'm saying I don't believe the sky's blue. I don't care.
Yeah, and so many NDEers, I've listened to their stories, and they'll say universal consciousness, the source, because they don't believe in God. And they'll say, I was told this and that, during their NDE. And it's like, well, who was that? Who is talking? Who's that voice? Who made the decision you're going back? Who brought you there, gave you this experience, exact experience you needed to help you on your way in your life? Who was that?
But you know what, Pegi? That really is between them and their God. God has to deal with that.
Right.
It's for us. I think that we can preach to a purple and not touch a soul. I think it's what we do by example. And that's all we can do. We can only be responsible for ourselves, and hope that our experiences. What does it even say in the Bible? If you have ears to hear and eyes to see, then you will hear and you will see, the message. If you don't, I write a lot of mysteries. And I had a girlfriend tell me, why I like your mysteries? Your bad guys are always so nice. Well, because I don't think people are black and white.
Well, you're Tiata. Is that how you say it? That movie there, you have it up on your wall?
Yeah.
Like, how did you do that? That is beautiful. That is such a, yeah.
You saw?
Oh yeah, I love that. I watched it a few years ago. I never forgot it. And then I seen us interviewing you, and I didn't connect it at first. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute. So I watched it again last night. And I'm like, how does anybody create something? Like, it's so beautiful. Especially the ending, the way it shows, the words at the end talking about who she was and what she did.
Yeah,
The whole thing's just beautiful.
they actually have a misspelling on that ending. Did you know that when they have the wording over there on the side? And it drives me crazy. It's a misspelling. It's not a misspelling. It's a misword. It said that she spoke at the first state dinner or something at the White House, and actually, it was something much more important than that. But I thought I have to give credit to Paul's sermons. I had been living in Topeka. My daughter lived in Kansas, and when Dean died, I came to visit her when she was in New Jersey, and then later they moved out here to Kansas. And a whole bunch of things had happened in my life. My husband and I got a divorce, which is a story unto itself. And I wrote a book about it called Murder in the News.
What's it called?
And I rear end. Yes, I did. I wrote a book and I murdered. That was my first book.
But what was it
uh,
called? I didn't catch it.
Murder in the Movies.
Murder in the Movies.
Murder
Okay.
movies. And I'd never written a book before, but I really needed to do away with the old bird. And so I sat down and I just pounded out my first novel, and it was accepted by the first publisher that took it. Anyway, a bunch of things have happened in my life, and I ended up here and in Topeka. And now I've forgotten the whole point I was going to make. What was my
We were talking about that movie.
Tayada. So I had been gone from Hollywood for some time, but even after I left MGM and I left Hollywood, I still continued writing films and still continued. I did go back to giving screenwriting workshops, but also talking a little bit once I wrote the book, talking a bit about Dear Dean. But I hadn't, I was through with Hollywood itself. I had lost respect for Hollywood. I so, you know, maybe it's a generation thing, but I just have no respect for the materials they turn out today, and I had no desire to be in Hollywood. And so one night, I am in Topeka. I'm in a house that was built in 1910, the old house. And I'm getting old. And I'm sitting here in my fluffy house shoes one night about 10 o'clock. I got a cat on my lap and the phone rings. And I answer it, and it's Paul Sermons, who's a producer, and I had known him for some years. And a man of just true integrity. So he says to me, "Can I talk you into writing one more screenplay?" And I said, "No, sir, can't be done." And he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "There hasn't been enough money minted to get me back. No way." And he said, "But this is a true story I would like to talk." And I said, "No, that's even worse. Spend months and months researching all the truth, and you write it meticulously, and you've got everything in there that's true. And then they come along, and whatever ends up on the screen, you go, where did they get that? Nope, can't be done." He said, "Look, I've been approached to produce a picture about a woman named Tayada." I never heard of Tayada, so that didn't impress me. And he said, "And I won't do it unless you write the screenplay, because like you, I want a true story. And I know you won't put a Hollywood spin on it. If I produce it, and I promise you that it's going to stay true, would you consider it?" And I said, not really, hon." He said, "Okay, all right. Just look her up on the computer. Just do some investigating, read about her, and then I'll call you back. And if you still say no, I'll honor that." And I said, "Okay." So I looked her up. I fell in love with her. This is one feisty gal. She was born in 1895, and she died in 1995. She was determined that her heritage would not be lost. No one could take that away from her. Now, her mother was German, I believe German, and her dad was part Indian, but they lived a Chickasaw life in Oklahoma. Very westernized, because the government had taken over. And, you know, there's a huge story to that. Anyway, I read about her. I loved her spirit. I loved her honesty. I loved the fact that she would stick out that little chin, and it was like, "Oh, no, you don't. You will not take my heritage away from me. In fact, I'll defy you. I will go around the world telling our stories." And she ended up, you know, performing at the White House, and just absolutely dearly beloved.
I love the part where she gets the denial letter, go to college, and she goes over 1,000 miles. And
Oh, let me tell you, it's so wonderful. I went to Oklahoma, and of course, the Chickasaw Nation financed that movie. This was their dearest wish. And so they gave me access to, I had access to her diaries, her mother's diary, to the
Oh.
letters that went back and forth. There was a huge bin of letters back and forth between her husband, Clyde, because he did a lot of lecturing all over the world and they wrote all the time back and forth. Her letters to her best friend, Margaret, all of those. So I can promise anybody that would see the movie Toyota, there's not one word of made up dialogue, not one word, and not one incident that didn't really happen.
And where at the end, towards the end, where she's laying her head on her dying dad's chest and saying she won't go to the White House and do that if he agrees to live or something like that. It's like, oh, it must be so nice to have such a loving father.
What she was saying is, if you really don't want me to go, Dad, I won't.
Right.
Nothing's more important than you. And
Right.
what really happened was, he had taught her the stories of their heritage using the figures on the wall. Well, it's got a name, I forget, but making images on the wall. That's how she had learned their stories. So he was too weak to speak, but he did a little image that said something like, go, fly like a bird, go. And so she went. But anyway.
I love the connection that her husband had that bright white hair and she was, and the white wolf that was throughout the movie.
I never even made that connection.
Really?
Oh, isn't that interesting?
I thought it was intentional, but I guess it wasn't.
Well, that's really how he looked.
I get into movies. I really do.
That's interesting. Well, there you go. You had eyes to see and ears to hear, and I even missed that.
I wanted my movie to appeal on the screen, and so I hired a screenwriter, and I waited these months for it to come back, and I couldn't get past the first page. I still haven't got past the first page. It's trash because it's lies.
Well, there you go.
It's lies. I'm like, how did I not make it clear? It has to be true to my word. My memoir is true to my word 100%. How could you, why would you change? What's wrong with the truth? What's the wrong with the history I present that you have to put in your creative work and lie all through it? I didn't ask you to do that.
I love you, because this is what I said to myself as I was writing Dear Dean Love Mom, and I'm going so fast because I'm hearing dictation. But some of the things are so hard to believe. And I would even stop and I would say, wait a minute. Am I conjuring this up? Is that really what happened? Now you stop and you go back in your mind and you relive that incident. And then I would realize, no, that really is what happened. But if you made something up, it isn't better than the truth. If you made it up, it would be to tone it down so somebody would believe. But
the truth is everything.
Even in the movie, in that book where I murdered my husband, I didn't really murder him, but I know how, and he won't mess with me again. But the incidents that I write about, I do it as fiction, but it's really true. There's really nothing better than the truth. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And just what we need, I was going to say, if anyone takes anything away from all of this that I've said today, I hope what they take away is the fact that paranormal is perfectly normal. And if they can comprehend that, if they truly embrace that, then they've just been given a divine assignment themselves. They are to be a lantern in the dark to those who feel hopeless and lost, and they are to tell their story, because everybody's got a story.
And the way I look at your story and everybody else's story, my story is, I have of looking at it is, God defied the laws of nature to give us these experiences. Because the laws of nature doesn't allow for these things to happen. And when they happen, like the woman that called you, the lady in the store, all these examples, your son contacting you as you're sitting on the bed just distraught, and you're given this. To me, it is a picture of God. It is God's love into our, infiltrating his love into our daily lives. These little miracles, that's just the thing we need at the time to get us through. And that's why I do this podcast, is I am showcasing God. I'm not coming here and preaching to you and saying, look at God. But even if an atheist comes on and they have his NDE, I'm still seeing God, whether they see it or not.
It doesn't matter. It's like we say, so the sky isn't blue. You can call it purple. You can call it green. Doesn't matter what you call it. I have to say, this is one of my friends, and I love her dearly. She's one of my dearest friends. But I was telling one of my stories, and she said, "Oh, don't." She couldn't get past page 13 of Dear Dean. She could not. She had to shut it. She just cannot accept it. And I said, "You don't believe it?" And she said, "No." And I said, "What part of it don't you believe?" And she said, "Any." And I said, "Well, honey, if I told you I went to the store today and I bought a loaf of bread, and that's all I told you, and you say, well, I don't believe that," I would say, "Well, what don't you believe? That I went to the store, that I bought the bread?" It's the same thing. I'm not telling you why anything happened, because I don't know why. I'm just reporting, and you take of it what you will. But it's just too hard for her to accept.
When I was growing up, my sister, she was a compulsive liar, or still is. And she was always telling ghost stories. And I hated that stuff. And then my dad, he remarried, and they would tell these, oh, there's this ghost. So we put this on the door so they don't come in. I'm like, oh, roll my eyes. And my grandma always taught me that kind of stuff was witchcraft. I mean, my dad had a Ouija board. And so I grew up thinking it's anti-Christian. And so when I had these memories and I had experiences, and I'm like, well, I can't talk about that because that's bad. That's wrong. I don't want to be crazy or liar like my sister, but these memories kept coming and always the same way. And as I get older, and as you get older, as you know, you start to care less what others think and care about what you know.
Exactly.
And start speaking your truth.
Yes. But do you realize what you just said? Edgar Casey himself had a terrible conflict because he was raised in a traditional church and he was a traditional preacher. And what he experienced in his sleeping state was the complete opposite of everything he'd ever been taught. And it was a huge conflict for him. And it just goes to show that we put the limitations on God. We do it.
We do.
It's a man-made limitation. Why can't we go through life just expressing what happened and living it as it happens and not worry about the consequences, because that's God's job. You know, he'll take care of who accepts it, who doesn't, who gets something out of it, who doesn't. The people that need to hear it will recognize what they need out of it. And those that don't, it doesn't matter. Somebody come up to me and say, I hate what you say. You know, if they did, no one's ever said that. They never had the nerve yet to say, I hate what you say. But I would still say that's your business. I wasn't speaking to you.
Yeah.
Obviously, I wasn't speaking to you.
Yeah. You know, and I get the same thing, on my channel, like you get on your book or your talks. I just lost my child and this helped me so much. I just lost my husband, or I was, at the verge of suicide, or all these things. And I'm thinking, I got to keep doing this.
You do. You've been given a divine assignment. And I think that, like I talk in one of my books, my book, Evidence of God, I talk about the fact when I was a little girl, we would travel all the time, and Mama would make me a bed in that little shelf under the back window. And that's where my little bed was. And we started before daylight, so I would see the sun come up, but I would see the last star in the sky, and tears would roll. And I would say, I miss you. I miss you so much. Why do I have to be here? Well, Mother would turn around and she'd say, oh, my heavens, Leslie, that child is back there squalling again. I do not know what's wrong with her. And she said that all the time. And I would think, I don't know them, God. I didn't say God. I didn't, because I didn't know it was God. I didn't know who I missed. I would just look at that sky, and I realized, no, it's homesickness. I wanted to be home. I can't explain that. I know I was too little to make it up, and I didn't tell anybody anyway. So there was I'm just repeating what I feel that you and probably there are millions of us who were sent here to listen to a story and to tell a story and to share a story. And I don't think it makes our personal life one bit easier. I mean, we all cope with ridiculously earthly things that are hard to deal with. But I still believe that's separate from what we've been given to do, from our divine assignment.
And people that think that this is all crazy and I'm crazy, you're crazy, everybody's crazy, that talks about this stuff. A few months ago, I was going through the process of being disabled through Social Security, and they mentioned my I'm talking to a psychiatrist that is deciding, you know, this part of my health, because I have anxiety and PTSD. It's not like I'm a crazy person. And so I says, well, is that a problem? Is that like consider working my podcast? And she says, oh, no, no, no. She says, you're helping people. We want you to keep doing that.
Oh, thank goodness.
She did. She said that. She says, you're helping people the same way I help people. And that was mental health from, you know, from our government. I feel like I got a stamp of approval.
That's amazing. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Well, that's kind of the end of my story.
Okay.
But I thank you so much there for letting me, you know, share those things. And we'll just have to know that there's somebody out there who needed to hear, if it was only one line of something I said, just one little passage or something you said, that there's a reason that we're here today. And there's a reason that they're listening this moment. That's not an accident.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And I love that stories are helping people. You know, it has to started back in the caveman days, you know, sit around the fire, tell their stories, you know, and I feel like we're back there, only with the internet and technology and everything. And people of all educational levels and all backgrounds, religious or non-religious backgrounds, having the same kind of experiences. We all can't be crazy. We all can't be liars.
Well, that's what Hello from Heaven is all about, you know, thousands of people telling their stories. And what's interesting is that Judy was a believer. Bill Guggenheim's wife, Judy. She was a believer. So she went, you know, she wanted to go out and gather all these stories. He did not believe, and he was going to expose it. And he became the biggest believer after all of the people, the thousands of people they talked to.
They've impacted a lot of people. I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, best of luck to you.
Thank you. And same to you.
And I've really enjoyed this, and it's been an honor to meet you.